Double throwdown Holley Ultra XP or low buck Brawler? Time for a 750 shootout. I have to admit, I was very excited when Holley introduced this Ultra XP carburetor because, let's face it, it's lightweight, and lightweight is the same as having more power because it's all about power to weight ratio. So if you improve one end of the scale, you can improve the other end of the scale, and it's always good. Plus, those carburetors just look awesome. I mean, they look racy, they work well. We know that because we use them all the time. I just walk over to the carburetor cabinet at Westech, stick whatever size I want on there, 650, 750, 850, 950, 1000, whatever we want. They even have them in Dominators. We run those a lot, and they work really well. They're cool, they're lightweight, so they got a lot of stuff going for them. But when I do these videos, I get a lot of comments. Hey Richard, why are you using those $1,000 carburetors on a 400 horsepower small block Chevy or small block Ford or whatever we happen to be running on? And really, that's a valid point. I mean, first of all, I'm guilty of it being cool. So when I go to the cabinet and pick a carburetor, I'm definitely going to pick the cool one because it's there and it's available. We know that it works great, and it looks awesome. So I'm guilty of that. But the reality is those comments are valid. For a normal street combination for a 400 horsepower motor, whether it's a Ford or Chevy, a big block or small block, whatever it is, for a mild combination, what people want to know is there a better choice than the $1,000 carburetor just to go run around and maybe take it to the track or whatever? Is there a low-cost option to the Ultra XP? Yes, there is. I have to admit that when Holley a few years back introduced the Brawler carburetor, their Brawler series, I was not as enthusiastic about that as I was when they introduced the Ultra XP, you know, the high zoot stuff. And the reality is I should have been. In fact, I should have been more excited about the Brawler carburetor because I'm a low buck guy. I mean, I'm the guy that goes to the wrecking yard, picks up those greasy motors, much to Steve Brulet's dismay, and tries to run them on the dyno and make them better for the lowest amount of, you know, money possible. And we try to get the most power out of it. So when Holley introduced the Brawler, I should have been all over it. And actually, eventually I was. I came to enjoy them and used them a lot on a lot of these junkyard motors, and they work well. But a few years back, I actually got a chance to do a back-to-back test comparing the Brawler to the Ultra XP because we had both of them. We had a motor on the dyno. I mean, it was an easy thing to test. So I wanted to find out. Now, we like the Ultra XP, and as I said, we've used it a lot. We use it all the time. I go grab, that's kind of our go-to carburetor because it's there and it's easy to use and it works well. But I wanted to find out how well does it actually work. I mean, it's almost $1,000 in our case when we priced them. This was about $930 or $940 through Summit. And if you take a look at a Brawler carburetor, it's less than half that. So that begs the question, if it costs less than half of the really high dollar race carburetor, does it deliver half of the performance? And as we found out, the answer is no. In fact, it delivers almost the same performance. So let's check it out. Right off the bat, the Ultra XP is an impressive carburetor. We know that. It works well. We've run it a lot. It's got an aluminum body that's 38% lighter than its predecessor. And as we know, less weight, same as more power. The Ultra XP has some cool stuff. Sight plugs clear on both sides, both bowls. To decrease the chance of fuel starvation, Holley increased the size of the fuel bowls. They increased capacity by 20%. The bowls feature drain plugs to make jet changes easy. The Ultra XP carburetors feature contour Venturi inlets, billet metering blocks, and a billet base plate. Each bowl also features dual fuel inlets. The carburetors also feature an integrated bypass valve, a fuel shelf, and internal baffling to prevent aeration. Though we ran our Ultra XP on gas, Holley also makes them available for E85 and methanol. If we take a look at the Brawler carburetor, it has a lot of similar features. Nice Venturi, although it does have a choke horn. We do have sight plugs, clear sight plugs, just the fuel level. Dual fuel inlets. The Brawlers are available with a mechanical or electric choke. The Brawlers can be had with either mechanical or vacuum operated secondaries. If we take a look inside, you see we've got air bleeds. Nice little trick for tuning. The Brawler also has billet metering blocks and billet base plate. Well, we've taken a look at the specifications of both carburetors. We've taken a look at how they visually appear, how they look, and obviously the most important thing obviously is price, the difference between the two. You know, the Ultra Double Throwdown Wishbone Alley Cat Hush Puppy Shoe Wearing Crumb Cake Ultra XP and the low-cost Brawler, Mauler, Staller, you know, it's been called a lot of things. But there's a big difference obviously in price, but is there a big difference in performance? Now we're going to take a look at a back-to-back test I ran on a small block Ford. This particular Ford was a 351 Windsor, but honestly it doesn't really matter what engine we put it on to compare them. It would work the same on the same kind of horsepower small block Chevy or big block. As a matter of fact, I wanted to point out the fact that a lot of times I'll get comments from people that say, hey look, what exact jetting did you use on this carburetor for this combination, because I'm trying to duplicate that, and what they don't realize is that we go to the carburetor cabinet where we have 650, 750, 850, 950 Dominators, and we will go grab a carburetor that was just run on a 468-inch big block and stick it right on top of a 300-inch small block. And you know what happens? What happens is it works really well, because carburetors do they do their job very well. They actually meter the fuel based on the airflow, and so they're pretty good at doing their job. Now obviously you might want to do jetting to optimize the thing, assuming that that combination responds to jetting, because sometimes they don't. Sometimes you stick a carburetor on there and it's 11.5 to 1, and you think, okay great, I'm going to tune some power out of this thing, and you change the jetting and you bring it up to 12 to 1 or 12.2 to 1, and it just doesn't really pick up any power. And this is especially true at the torque peak, seems to be more so than the horsepower peak. So know in advance that if you take a carburetor out of the box, and we've done this test probably 30 or 40 times, you just take a carburetor out of the box and stick it on, it works pretty well. You don't have to worry about changing, like, oh no, I have to change the jets by 3 jet numbers or whatever. Now you can do that, and it's really good to do that on a chassis dyno. You can also do that out on the street with an air fuel meter, because there are a lot of good like standalone air fuel meters. Go out and find out how it works, and you know, fine tune the idle and the transition circuit and all that stuff, and you can really get it to make it work well on your combination. But actually, right out of the box, they seem to work pretty well. So on this test, comparing our really high dollar Ultra XP to our low buck Brawler, this was a good test. So we ran a 351 Windsor. This started out long ago as a 351 Windsor crate motor from Ford Racing. It was originally like a 385 horsepower motor, but we had made some changes to it over the years. As a matter of fact, it sat for, I'm sure, 6 or 7 years before before we finally used it again. It had been so long that we didn't even really know what the camshaft was anymore, because there weren't any notes on it. So all we know is it had about 575 lift. So judging by this power output and the rest of the combination, I'm assuming that it's going to be comparable to that Extreme Energy 274 cam, maybe one step above that. But we did measure the valve lift, which was easy to do. But the rest of the motor had also been changed. That combination originally came with a Ford Racing head, but it had since been changed to the HOLLEY System X heads, which I don't think are available anymore. It also had a dual plane RPM air gap, and it had 1 3/4 headers and an MSD distributor, kind of typical of the way that we would run it. So run first with the Brawler, and this is a 750 Brawler carburetor, with mechanical secondaries, because they're available as we went over with a bunch of different configurations. But this was a mechanical secondary. It had air bleeds and stuff in it, but we didn't change any of that stuff. What we did was set it up with jetting, and we ran the same jetting in both of the carburetors, and we've got some interesting stuff to talk about there too. So run in this configuration, obviously we optimized the timing, and on this 351, it ran best at 35 degrees of total timing. With the Brawler carburetor, the combination made 410.8 horsepower, so we'll call that 411, and made 421 foot-pounds of torque. So here's what happened after we installed the, you know, double throwdown, ultra super light, whiz bang, Ultra XP carburetor. And we actually did see a slight gain in power. Now, it was not a lot. It went up to 418 horsepower, so you're talking about a difference of 7 horsepower. It was a little bit better. But I have to also point out the fact that when we ran the Brawler carburetor and this carburetor, we ran the same jet split on these things. And with the Brawler carburetor, it was slightly richer than it was with the XP. Unfortunately, I didn't have a whole bunch of time to dial in the carburetors, but know that it was about 0.3 of an air fuel point richer with the Brawler carburetor than it was with the Ultra XP. So if anything, we might be able to tune a little bit more power out of the Brawler combination and bring it a little closer to the XP. But the point of all this is that the Brawler carburetor works very well. It's low buck. I mean, if we look at some comparisons here, we see that the difference in power there of 7 horsepower at 418 horsepower is a difference in power of roughly 1.6%. So the difference in price, the Brawler is, well, the XP is more than 100%, costs 104% more than the Brawler does. So for 100% more than 100% more money, you have a power difference of 1.6%. So you guys have to decide if that's worth it. And in my opinion, it's not, because for a street type combination for this 400, 450, even up to maybe 500 horsepower, I probably would pick the Brawler carburetor. It's a lot less money. It works within 1.6% of the power output of the more expensive carburetor. Now, if I was putting together a track car and I wanted to make a lot of power and I was going for every last bit, that Ultra XP really is nice, and it's really hard to beat. And the other thing to think about is it's very lightweight compared to their older carburetors. I mean, it drops weight quite a bit. So as we know, less weight is the same as more horsepower. So it definitely does its job, and it will make a little more, and it will make more power. And probably as we go up in power, the Ultra XP would begin to show itself even more. But at this kind of power level, that Brawler Brawler carb, sorry about that, is really hard to beat. Okay guys, what'd you think about our low buck carb comparison? In all honesty, obviously I'm a junkyard guy, so I like this kind of stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, the Ultra XP would definitely be my go-to choice if I was building some kind of race motor and I wanted every last bit of horsepower out of it. It's a cool carburetor, it's lightweight, it has a lot of tricks and a lot of versatility, and it works well for really cool race applications. But if you're doing a street car, that Brawler carburetor is going to be hard to beat. I mean, it's like within this much power of the double throwdown piece, and it's this far away in price. It's less than half the price of the Ultra XP, and it works very well. It's tunable, it responded to jetting, it did all of the things that you'd want of a carburetor. It has full race, high-speed air bleed adjustment. It has sight plugs. It has a lot of cool features on it for such a low cost. As a matter of fact, when I first did the test and we were telling everybody how great this carburetor was, I think that Holley even raised the price on them because they became so popular. But that's part of what happens when we do the test and tell everybody how great it is. So make sure when you're watching this video, don't tell anybody else, because then Holley might raise the price again. I'm Mr. Holdener, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. Let me know if you want to see more low buck versus high buck testing coming up.